My name is Autumn Seymour, and in this presentation, I'm going to explain why I chose to write my research essay on how Civil War photography shaped American understanding of conflict. I've always been drawn to photography, not just as a hobby, but as a real art form. I'm a junior at Grace Covenant, and I'm also the chief photography editor on my yearbook team. Because of that role, I've learned how powerful a single image can be, how it can tell a story, teach a lesson, convey emotion in a way that sometimes words just can't. So, when I learned that the Civil War was the first major American conflict to be photographed, I immediately knew that this was the topic I wanted to study. One of the biggest reasons I chose this topic is because photography is more than just words. It's a way of witnessing something you were never physically present for. As an amateur photographer, I really believe that photos carry emotion, memory, and perspective. So, when I realized that people living in the 1860s were experiencing something similar, being confronted with real images from the battlefield for the first time, it made me want to understand how that changed the nation. Before this, war had mostly been described in letters or newspapers. Those are useful, but they're distant. Photos, in contrast, force you to look at the truth. They make it real. Photography changed how the Civil War was interpreted, felt, and remembered. And as someone who deeply values visual storytelling, that felt meaningful to me on a personal level. Another reason this topic stood out to me is because the impact of Civil War photography relates to what I try to do in my own work, even though my setting isn't on a battlefield. In yearbook photography is my job to capture authentic moments. I have to think about how an image makes someone feel and how it tells a story without needing a paragraph next to it. When I researched photographers like Matthew Brady and Alexander Gardner, I admired how intentional they were. Brady created portraits of battlefield scenes that gave the public a new kind of access. Gardner went even further. He got close to the front lines to capture raw, emotional images. Their photos weren't just documentations. They were narratives. And that idea that a photo can teach, reveal, and even reshape a person's understanding directly connects to why I value photography today. My essay focuses on 4 main areas that also explain why this topic was worth choosing. First, Civil War photography made the war feel immediate and personal. For the first time, civilians saw wounded soldiers, destroyed landscapes, and the emotional costs of conflict. Second, the works of Brady and Gardner became essential in shaping public understandings. They created images that still define how Americans visualize the Civil War. Third, the photographs shifted how people thought about the conflict. Instead of seeing it as a distant or political thing, they saw it as human. And finally, these images continue to matter today. They became part of national memory, a kind of visual shrine that generations return to when trying to understand the war. Many of these photographs are preserved and displayed in museums across the country, allowing people to see these powerful images firsthand and connect with the human experiences they capture. These subtopics show that this wasn't just a historical subject, it was a turning point in how stories, especially painful ones, were told. When I started this project, my main question was simple: why was photography so important? I knew why it mattered in my life, but I wanted to understand why it mattered in history. What made a photograph so significant to people living in the past, and how did it shape their understanding of events? To answer that, I used photographs as my main sources, looking closely at the images captured by Matthew Brady and Alexander Gardner. I also consulted articles and essays from historians such as Alan Trachtenberg, to support my observations and provide context. Most of my research came from online databases and library archives, which took some digging. One challenge I ran into was finding reliable, evidence-based scholarly sources. There's a lot of information online, but most of it isn't trustworthy. So I had to be careful to select sources with proven scholarship and real documentation. Organizing all the information I found was another challenge. I wanted to make sure I wasn't just inserting my opinions, but instead interpreting the data accurately and showing how photography actually influenced public perception of the Civil War. At first, I picked a significant event from the time period to focus on, but then I discovered that the Civil War was the first major American conflict to be widely photographed. That was a major surprise, and it shifted my focus to the larger question. How did these images impact the people then, and how do they still matter today? My writing process involved many drafts, revisions, and feedback from peers. I tried to put myself in the shoes of the photographers, imagining what it would be like to capture these moments and understand the emotional weight of the images. Through this process, I discovered that photographs don't just document history, they shape it, they create empathy, preserve memory, and make abstract events tangible. Ultimately, my research showed me why photography matters, not only in art but in history. Civil War photography gave Americans a new way to understand the cost of human war. It forced people to see what was really happening, and it changed how history is remembered. This matters because understanding the why behind these images help us appreciate not only what happened in history, but how people experienced it and why those experiences mattered to them and to generations after. Photography today is everywhere. Everyone has a camera in their pocket, but during the Civil War, this was revolutionary. I chose this topic because it marks the moment when photography stopped just becoming technology and became a testimony. It forced people to see what was really happening, even if it was uncomfortable. And that's part of why I respect photography so much. It doesn't just show a story, it teaches one. It can reveal truth, create empathy, and make us confront realities we might otherwise ignore. Civil War photography did all of that on a national scale. As someone who spends a lot of time thinking about the meaning behind photos, it shaped not just my individual emotions, but it shaped the entire country's understanding of war, of sacrifice, and of memory. In the end, I chose this topic because it combines the two things that really mattered to me: history and photography. The Civil War was the first widely photographed war, and those images changed how Americans saw conflict forever. They brought the battlefield into people's homes, they made the war impossible to ignore, and they changed how history is narrated, not just written. Studying this topic showed me that the lasting power of photography, and it reminded me on why I believe so strongly in the stories that images can tell. Thank you for listening.